All right, so good morning, everyone. As you know, I'm Shereka Simmonds, your tutor today for CSEC Economics. It's not a lot of us that are here, so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is please let this be like a one-on-one or a very small tutor session where we'll answer the questions together and try to get an understanding of everything. So if there's something that you're unsure about, please don't be afraid to just raise your hand or even just open your mic. As I said, it's not a lot of us. So just open your mic and go ahead and ask your question. So with that being said, can you guys just tell me your names? Because I'm noticing that some persons don't actually have their names up. So just let me know your names, please, because the group is pretty small. So we can do that. Anybody would like to go first? Oh, go ahead.
My name is Shakai.
Akari,
Shakai.
Shekai. All right.
Yeah.
Nayo.
Nayo. All right. Hopefully I get these pronunciations correct when I'm referring to you guys in the future. Anybody else? If you're a bit shy, Dana.
Yes, miss.
All right. So if you're a bit shy, that's fine. You can always type in the chat if you have a question. So let me know, how are you guys currently with economics? Is it a strong point for you and you're just here for like a makeup session before the exams, or it is that you're not sure where you are and you just want some guidance?
Miss, I am very bad at economics. I am currently studying biology over it because it's right after the biology exam and I really don't know what to do. But I'm still trying to get in some information so at least I could answer questions on the paper.
Okay, great. All right, so Nadia is on a level where she's trying to study for two exams, so that's understandable. Anybody else? Everybody else, I'm guessing, is good at econ.
No, same here. Very not good.
Very bad. All right. So, all right. I'm getting that most of you guys are expressing that you're bad. Do you know your weaknesses, or you're just bad at everything?
I'm bad with the graphs, like the cost curves and stuff.
Yeah,
The
honestly, the
cost
graphs
curves.
and the demand and them type of like probably if it is explained properly or differently from teachers because they can't explain it good enough.
All right, so I'm making notes. So once we've gone through the paper, what I'll do is I'll just have like a session where we'll just talk about the pain points. So I'll try to cover them in the review of the paper, but what I'll also do is maybe stray a little and do some deeper explanations. So you guys can look out for that. So graph is a pain point, demand, cost curves, those things.
Yes, thank you.
And everything on the syllabus after inflation is a no-no for me.
For real.
That is where my capacity reached inflation. Everything after
Yes.
that, absolutely not.
And unemployment and thing. That's fine.
That means unemployment, trade agreements, money, all of
yes,
that, you're
trade
clueless.
agreements, yes. Yes, that's
All right.
Will we get access to the recording afterwards?
Yes, it will be posted on YouTube, so you will have access to it.
By chance, what is the channel?
So it's New Jamaica Foundation. So we do have papers from last year as well and the year before if you want to review those as well. So with that being said, we're going to go through the paper. As I said, what I'll do based on the understanding that I got from the various opinions shared is that you guys want a review session, but you also want a teaching session. So I try to incorporate a little teaching in the review of the 2023 paper. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please confirm once you're seeing it. Let me know if you guys are seeing it.
Yes, we can see.
All right, great. So let me go back to it.
Actually, that paper was my economics mock.
That was your mock exam?
Yeah, entire.
Really? And how did you do on that?
I have no idea. I have no clue.
All right, so let's see, based on what we will go through today, how you did. So as I said, Shereka Simmonds here, New Jamaica Foundation. This is our economics marathon session. So the first question, define labor and capital. So how did you define labor and capital on your mock exam?
Miss, for me, I had labor is the mental and physical experts by an individual to create a good or service.
So that would give you your complete 2 marks. Anybody else would like to share what they would have answered? Because the thing is, guys, for economics, it's depending on how you answer the question. There is never a wrong explanation because we all interpret things differently. So if it is that you might word it a specific way versus how I word it, once certain concepts are explained, then you'll be able to capitalize on the mark. So one thing to note as well, please pay attention to the mark scheme for each question. That will tell you, all right, do I need to write a whole paragraph? Do I need to write a story, or do I just need one word or one sentence? So pay attention to that. So labor refers to all physical and mental efforts, because remember, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're actually doing something with your hands. It can be that you're thinking of an idea, you're coming up with a solution. That is still considered labor because persons are paid for their ideas, as you guys would know. So it doesn't have to be physical, hence the reason why you have to include the mental effort aspect. So that would be 1 mark. The fact that you've included that it's both a physical and mental effort. And then your other mark will come in when you mention that it's used for the production of goods and services. So there you see where the 2 marks would come from. As it refers to capital, it's basically the same thing. What is capital? What it's used to do? So capital refers to the asset that allows us to increase our work productivity. So 1 mark would be given for the fact that you would have referred to the fact that it's an asset. So it's something that should be giving you some value. And then the second aspect would be that, it does increase work productivity. And capital can be in the form of, it can be in the form of money, it can be in the form of tool, equipment, factories, technologies that are used overall in order to enhance some process. So any questions based on those 2 terms?
No.
All right, can somebody tell me where in the circular flow would labor fall? Circular flow of income. Remember, it's a learn while we're going through the paper.
Labor, not production.
From like household to firms.
So it would be from where? Household to firms?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. So that is correct. So it would be one of the things that are needed in order to produce certain goods, and it's offered by us, the consumers, to these firms or organizations. So that's correct. Remember, it's a factor of production. So you can make a note of that. All right, so state 2 disadvantages of the division of labor for employees. So what is division of labor, first of all? Anybody can say?
Everybody in the business getting a different job or different area where they skill that, or specialize in a
Dividing,
different area. Yeah, dividing labor.
Yes,
dividing
that's
with
correct.
tasks.
Yeah.
Yes, so that would be correct. And I think somebody referred to specializing, that's also correct. So it's basically placing persons where they are most efficient in order to maximize an output. So
Maximizing profit as well, right?
yes,
In
because
the
once,
workforce.
yes. So sometimes it is that persons are, we're looking at the disadvantages now. So we're trying to see what can happen, not just to the organization, but to these persons when it is that, there's maybe an exhaustion of division of labor or something like that. So one would be over-relying on other countries. So as you guys would have mentioned, division of labor refers to specializing for particular skill sets. So imagine I'm going to say we're trying to plant some bananas and farm and export. If it is that we're pressuring these persons will become burnt out. That would be one of the disadvantage for the individual itself. They will become burnt out over a period of time. As you know, if persons get tired of doing their job, they don't feel motivated, over a period of time, their productivity is going to decrease. Once that productivity decreases, that can change the demand drastically because again, persons are going to tell persons, then they're going to be like, oh, don't go in this field because it's pretty exhausting. So that would lead us to our change in demand. So the change in demand for that particular labor will reduce. So let me go over that because it might be a lot. So we're taking it one step at a time. You're working on a farm, you go to the farm every day, you plow the land, you reap the bananas, you stock them, all of that. Over a period of time, you're going to lose the motivation, the drive that you would have had in the initial stages. That will cause you not to produce as more. So before you maybe would have reaped and packed maybe 50 bananas. Now you're only doing 15. So now you see where the productivity has decreased. Hence, there's going to be a change in the demand for that job. Persons are going to start leaving, then the jobs are going to be like, oh, we need more persons who are willing to do these particular tasks. So that's the reference to the changes in demand. And it's referring to change in demand for the job and not the product. All right, guys. You guys still with me? Or you lost? Let me know.
Yes, miss.
All right, so that refers to the change in demand. Again, remember it's a particular skill that they're looking for. Over a period of time, if persons are going to leave the job, this skill will become depleted. Hence the reference to limited resources because, for example, we're going to look at persons who are executives. You don't have a lot of executives in some countries. And even if there is a lot compared to the other population, there isn't a lot. So when there's division of labor and they split up these persons and have them in specific areas over a period of time when these persons maybe retire, maybe they die for some reason, these resources are limited. So they become depleted, hence they are referred to as limited resources. If it is a case where the economy was more diverse, so I would have a skill set, maybe I can be an executive, maybe I can be a farmer, then you wouldn't have that disadvantage. But the fact that I would have gone to school to specifically work on being an executive, that would be a hindrance. Everybody understands the limited resources point?
Yes, miss.
All right, great. And then over-relying on a specific country, that's pretty self-explanatory. If it is that a country specializes in a particular good and that country then for some reason experiences some difficulties, then you know that other economies will be affected if they're dependent on that country. So it only asks you for two disadvantages, sorry. So, and it just requires 2 marks. So you don't need to have a written explanation for each, but you would just need to state that, all right, division of labor would lead to limited resources and changes in demand of labor. But just for understanding purposes, I would have gone into the in-depth detail of explaining each. Any questions on that part? Everybody should be able to understand what's division of labor and how it affects us, right?
Yes, miss.
All right.
Yes,
So
sir.
with that answer, I'm going to ask, can somebody tell me advantage of division of labor? So we would have spoken about the downside. I just want 2. So one person can give me one and then another person gives me another.
Maybe since they're doing the job over and over, they'll become better at it.
So productivity would increase.
Yeah.
All right, but you have to your answer is not wrong, but you have to take into consideration the marginal productivity of labor. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that term. So remember, they usually say the more persons you add, productivity would gradually decrease. So your answer is not wrong if you're looking from the individual aspect, but from an economic aspect, it would be a little bit off. So you need to add something else to that to make it more solid. Anybody else?
Yes, well, it would be like time saving. It wouldn't have to spend all that time for production, which makes production faster, they'll be able to produce more, seeing that everybody specializes in a different area.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, that would be a good point. So increasing productivity overall, because persons aren't wasting their resources on areas that, they might need training in and anything like that. So increasing productivity, definitely. Anybody else would like to add the last one? Anybody else? Think of it as your day-to-day thing, guys. That's the thing with economics. You don't have to think too far. You can just look at things from the surface level. All right, so I'm going to add something to the first point that was made. If it is that somebody is able to do a task repetitively and they're able to master it without any error, what is it that the economy or the organization is able to benefit? Remember, somebody mentioned before that profit is very, very important for these businesses. So what is it that you being able to master your task, and what will the company save? That's a hint. No comments, so I'm going to finish it. So it would be a case where the cost of production is reduced. So adding to what the first person would have said, as I said, your answer wasn't incorrect, but you just needed to add something else. So somebody repeating their task every day and mastering it, that would reduce the company's cost overall, or what we call unit cost. So the cost to produce one particular good. So we covered both the advantage and disadvantage of division of labor. So everybody should be good for this question. I'm hoping that is. All right, so the next question. Explain how a large chain of fast food restaurants might use each of the following economies of scale to its advantage. So first question to ask ourselves is, what is economies of scale?
That is the advantages that a business experience when they expand their business. Advantages that happen when they
I didn't hear the last part, sorry.
As I just said, that is the advantages that the firm experiences when they expand their business.
Yes, so it's usually, as she said, for larger firms where they're able to make a lot of profits because they're so huge. So they're able to produce more at a lower cost. So that's the key point. Economies of scale has to do with a business, company, a country, whichever, being able to produce a particular good at a lower cost. So more of a particular good at a lower cost. So, you have different aspects of economies of scale. So these aspects refer to like particular sectors or situations in which these companies are able to benefit. So they're asking you to explain for financial and marketing. So when you hear financial, what comes to your mind? Financial. What
Well,
comes to
if the firm is like large enough, in terms of the financial economies of scale, it would be easier for them to borrow money
yes.
from the bank because the bank would not see them as a risk, so they will be able to borrow money. I think.
Yes.
Larger
Yes, that's correct. That's 100% correct. So as it says financial, once you think of financial, you're thinking of borrowing, investing, loans, maybe insurance, stuff like that. So with the advantage that these companies have where they're able to produce more at a lower cost, that cost that they're able to reduce will make them more susceptible to like high risk. If there is a storm, for example, on a banana farm or something, they're able to recover easily because their cost is pretty low. With that being said, these banks or financial institutions are usually eager to lend companies like these money because they know, all right, if there's a situation where the company fails, they can recover easily and pay us back our money. So go ahead, Dana.
Yes, we kind of look at from a perspective when they are purchasing goods like in bulk, can they like get discounts? Can they look at it
I
like
didn't
that? For
hear
example,
that.
beg your pardon?
I wasn't hearing you.
Oh, I said, can you look at it from the point like when these large businesses are buying goods in bulk, they receive discounts? Can that be one?
Yes, that can be one as well. Because as I said, remember, it has to do with anything monetary. Has to do with anything monetary. So if it is that they're able to complete their transactions, as you said, at a lower cost, that can also be a financial economies of scale. But it's 2 marks, so you would have to explain that, the purchasing of raw materials at a lower cost, and then you would tie in how it is that related to economies of scale. So for my explanation, I had said financial economies of scale can be used by the chains by increasing their capital. That means expanding even more as they are given lower interest rates, as the first person would have said, because they are not a high risk business. So you know that there are different types of risk appetite. So you have high risk, low risk, and medium. So these businesses are usually medium to low. So they are given much more attractive interest rates. So they can even expand even further. So marketing economies of scale, it's pretty much the fact that these large firms, they tend to have a large market share. And we know that market share basically refers to the section or portion of the market that a particular business controls or influences. I'm going to use that word since we're referring to marketing. So if it is that these firms have a large advertising power, they're able to reach much more persons, hence penetrating the market even further. And this is usually at a very, very low cost. So that would be your marketing economies of scale. So it's about how can we advertise and not spend as much as we would if we were a small business. And in this case, the comparison that you're always going to make is the comparison of the output versus what the business has to put in. So with marketing, they're putting in little to no effort because of their market share, but the output costs is very low. Same for financial, they're gaining so much from these banks in terms of low interest rates and all of that, and they don't have to pay back much money. Any questions for those 2 points?
No, miss.
All right, great. All right, so technical and managerial. So these are pretty straightforward. So managerial, as you guys would know, has to do with the executives, persons who are trained in leadership in order to lead the business. So if we're able to reduce the costs when it comes down to hiring maybe persons who are not efficient, we are able to hire a manager who is able to maybe do 2 or 3 persons job instead of hiring 3, 4, 5 managers, then that would be managerial economies of scale. And for technical, no, this is basically investing in making processes faster or investing in equipments to make processes faster, hence increasing total output. So yeah, these explanations are pretty self-explanatory, but if you guys have any questions, you can let me know. Right, I'm guessing no questions. So the next part. So XYZ Limited is a small firm. Also, guys, when you're answering these questions, usually what I do, I usually bring like a pen or something of a different color than what I'm using to answer my questions and circle key terms. So small firm is a key term because, you know, in economics, they usually refer to small or large firms, or they usually refer to long-term versus short-term. And in both scenarios, the answer usually varies. So make a note of these keywords when you're answering certain questions. So in this case, we're going to make a note of the fact that they say it's a small firm. So a small firm that makes bicycles, use the information in table 1 below, which displays the quantity and some costs incurred by XYZ Limited to produce bicycles, and answer the questions that follow. Insert the answers in the table in the spaces labeled I, and I. So the first section says calculate fixed costs when no bicycles are produced. All right, so let's go through a simple breakdown here. What is fixed costs? Anybody?
This fixed cost is basically the cost that stays the same, like something you always have to pay no matter what you make. Like, for example, rent would be an example of fixed cost because you always have to pay rent.
Yeah, regardless if you're making profit or not. That's correct. So we know what fixed cost is, and fixed cost is in the section where quantity is 0. So a key thing to note, your fixed cost is equal to total cost when quantity is 0. So fixed cost is equal to total cost when quantity is 0. So with that being said, what is the answer for I?
10.
10, that's correct. So let me see if I can get a marker to just make a note that fixed cost is equal to total cost when quantity, hopefully it removes, equal, it should be Q equals 0. So when Q equals 0, so next question, I have to erase it. Next question, calculate the variable cost when 1 bicycle is produced. So we would have made a note earlier to say fixed cost is equal to total cost. So we know that fixed cost doesn't change regardless. So you can already just fill in this section to say fixed cost is 10 for everything, because it won't change no matter if we produce 1,000 goods, 1 goods, 5, fixed cost will remain the same. So we know that fixed cost is 10 and we're given total cost of 14. So all you need to do is just to say total cost. So TC, let me write again, even though it's, so TC minus FC. And these are formulas that persons usually just write down and memorize. So TC minus FC is equal to VC. Or you can always make a note of the universal formula, which is FC plus VC is equal to TC. So this is the universal formula. TC, which is total cost, is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. And you can always transpose this formula here to find TC, VC, or FC, anyone. So if TC minus FC is equal to VC, so it would be 14 minus 10, that gives us a variable cost of 4. Everybody see how we arrived at 4?
Yes, Miss.
All right, great. And then the last part says calculate the total cost when 2 bicycles are produced. And we just mentioned that the formula for total cost is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost, and that is 17. So you guys would have noticed that each question here values 2 marks. The reason for that is along with the calculation, they want you to state your formula. So you would just put in 10 on the paper. They don't know what that 10 is or what that 10 is referring to. They actually know, but they're just plain, dumb to say, all right, you need to explain. So please ensure that you have your formulas when you're working certain questions. All right, moving right along. Let me erase this. You don't have any questions for calculation of total fixed or variable costs, right? Pretty self-explanatory. All right, so list 3 non-price factors other than its own price that impacts the demand for a good. So this is one of your guys' pain points. So demand, what is demand? Let's have a little brainstorming session. What is demand?
That is the like the number of people willing and able to buy a good.
Yes. Perfect. There's a number of persons willing and able to. Willing and able is very important because you can want something, but you can't afford it. So willing and able to purchase a particular goods or services at a specific price. So the definition would have given the fact that price is a factor that affects the demand. So they don't want you to tell them about the price. They want you to tell them about something else. So I would have stated 3. My 3 were income substitutes and preference RTs. You have several others, and I'll ask you guys to just tell me one more so we can have at least 4 to choose from if this question comes up again.
Well, it have the type of work that that person does can affect what they buy, as well as the season, whether it be summer or winter. They'll most likely in summer want something like shorts, and rain season they want to buy more umbrellas and stuff like that.
Yes, so season can affect their demand. Anybody else would like to add another one? All right, no. A pretty straightforward one would be advertising. Because, you know, sometimes you buy things based on what you see on social media or what you see on TV. So advertising would be a good one. And it's pretty easy to explain if you were asked to explain as well. So I think you guys would know how each of these would affect the demand. Income, the more money you have, the more things you can buy. Substitutes, if there's something else that is maybe a better product of better value, then you might choose that product over buying a particular one. And if everyone has their own tastes and preferences, so maybe you just don't like it, you don't buy it. All right, so list 3 factors that impact the price elasticity of supply. So that sounds like a fancy term. So we need to debunk what is price elasticity of supply.
Actually, that is not my strong suit. No, word. Let me try. I think it has to do with the how responsive a good is to a change in something. We're changing the price. How responsive is
how-
in price.
So how supply changes with a response to a change in price.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. You see, guys, don't doubt yourselves. And I would love to hear from other persons as well. Not sure if there was something in the chat. Oh, I don't know what you were referring to, Anissa, the bandwagon effect. That was for which question? When she answers, you guys can let me know what she's saying. So yes, price elasticity. Question A. We did a lot of A's. All right, make a note of it and then we'll go back to it afterwards and have a discussion about it. So 3 factors that impact the price elasticity of demand. So as somebody mentioned, it's the responsiveness of supply to a changing price. So they want to know if I'm supposed to change of the price of a particular good, whether up or down, how will supply respond? And they want to know the factors that affect these things. So one would be technology or innovation, prices of other goods, and the availability of resources, or what we refer to as raw materials. Anybody would like to take a try at it to try and explain how one of these terms impact price elasticity?
Cost of production isn't one.
Cost of production?
Is it one? Like, is it a factor?
Yes, it would be a factor. Yeah, remember the options are not limited to what I have on the screen here, guys. And remember, it's referring to supply, so it's from the business side of things. Right, so with technology, you know, they'd be able to produce goods more effectively. So if it's a case where there is a fall or increase in price, they'll be able to better respond to these changes without being impacted as much. Prices of other goods, we know definitely that their competition is going to affect how they respond to producing goods and services. Also, the availability of raw material. If they don't have these raw materials, they won't be able to meet the demand. Hence, their competition can take advantage of that. And in the case of cost of production, as somebody said, if it's too expensive to produce a particular goods or services, we know that these companies usually move away from that, and other companies who are able to produce it at a lower cost will take up that responsibility. So that's it for that question. If there's no concerns, we'll move on to the other aspect of the paper. All right, so I don't think we need to go through this part, but let's breeze over it real quick. For each of the following pair of goods, explain which good is more price elastic demand, has more price elastic demand. So a red car versus all motor vehicles, it would be the red car, of course, because it's more unique. So, you know, a slight change in price is going to cause a huge jump in demand. Jewelry, that's the same. It's pretty much a luxury good. So a small change in price will affect the demand drastically, while as prescription medication is very essential. So regardless of the price, persons are going to want to pay for it. So an increase in gas price tax today, well, gas prices today, or tax on gas a year after. So tax is usually a very slow one. So the answer would be, in this case, a tax on gas a year after the tax is introduced, because that's when persons will actually realize that, no man, this is pretty expensive, and they would start to change their demand choices. So laptop or electricity, laptop would be the answer here, because most persons don't really need a laptop. So if it is that it goes up maybe by 15,000 something, they would maybe opt to say, let me buy a smartphone instead and leave the laptop alone. Whereas electricity, if the bill comes for 7,000 this month, 5,000, you're going to pay it regardless, because you need the electricity. So as I said, those are pretty simple. Any questions before we move on? Everybody understands why we would have chosen those options as being more elastic.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Now to the fun part. So figure 2 represents the market of coffee in Joland, and they want us to answer the questions that follow. All right, so as you guys know, when constructing your graph, we're going to take it from the basic. When constructing your graph, your price is always on which axis? Guys, remember you told me you don't like graphs in an...
And your
The y-axis.
Yes, so price is always on the y-axis. And this is for both demand and supply curves. So once they refer to demand, supply, the price is always on your y-axis, quantity is always on the x-axis. So I'm going to stop sharing and share a whiteboard. Yeah, whiteboard, but another application that will allow me to write. Let me know once you're seeing the screen. All right, so don't mind the rapid drawing, please. And you guys will be able to write as well. So, as I said, price is always on your y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. So we're going to discuss some of the features about the demand curve and the supply curve. So the demand curve is always downward sloping. And there's an explanation for that. So sometimes you might look at the graph and you don't know which is the demand curve versus which is the supply curve. The demand curve is always downward sloping, and downward sloping looks like this. So imagine you're going down a hill. So the demand curve always downward sloping, and that is because there's an inverse relationship between price and the quantity demanded. So the reason why the demand curve is downward sloping, there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. I'm going to explain that. So if price is approximately at $10 here, you realize quantity may be about 2. We move to another point where price is 5. We can say maybe quantity is about 4. So what you can know, the higher the price, the less goods you are able to purchase. Because with $5, I could have gotten 4 bananas, but with $10, I only got 2. So there's an inverse relationship there between those two features. Hence the reason why the demand curve is downward sloping. Everybody understands that?
Yep.
All right, great. So the next curve that we'll have to tackle is the supply curve. Let me get an eraser. So the supply curve is upward sloping, and it's basically the opposite of the demand curve. The reason for that is because as price goes up, the companies or businesses are going to want to produce more of that particular goods because they want to maximize on profits. So this is our demand curve. This is our supply curve. So as I said, supply curve is always upward sloping, and there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. And again, if I was supposed to draw the line from 10 and 5, you will see that at a higher price, the quantity is larger versus 5, where we're at a lower quantity. So everybody understands how we identify at least those two curves given a blank graph. For the persons who said they had an issue with demand and the graphs, you understand how we identify those two curves? I'm guessing that's a yes. So moving right along to the question that we were given. So it had asked us to label the demand curve with the letter D and the supply curve with the letter S. Let me go back to sharing that screen. All right, so they would have asked us to label the curves. So this one here, downward sloping, that's your demand curve, upward sloping, your supply curve. So next question says, on the diagram, identify the market equilibrium. What is a market equilibrium, or what does the term refer to? Or when does it happen? All right, so no responses. So market equilibrium basically refers to that price and quantity where supply meets demand. So it's just the intersection between the supply and demand curve. So in this case, it's just this little point here. And I would have indicated it with a star on the left. So going over what was just said, your graph always have your price axis, the price labeled on the y-axis and the quantity labeled on the x-axis. Your supply curve is upward sloping, your demand curve is downward sloping, and your equilibrium happens where the supply curve meets the demand curve. So since we don't have any questions about this graph, we're going to move on to the other part of the question. So on the diagram below, illustrate how a severe storm in Jolan would impact the coffee market. So I'm going to ask somebody to, we're going to work through that aspect together. So we're going to bring up a whiteboard where everybody can just share. All right, guys, so let me just draw the first one and then we'll add the details.
I just have a quick question, Miss. Is this class uploaded to a Google Classroom or something?
The recording will be posted on YouTube.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys, so this is our, why this looks so bad? All right, so this is our diagram. So I'm going to ask somebody if there's a storm in a particular country that specifically produces a particular good, what do you think will be affected? Will it be their demand or their supply?
Miss, can you repeat, please?
All right, no problem. So the question is, let me read back the original question and then rephrase it for you guys. So they said on the diagram below, illustrate how a severe storm in Jolan would impact the coffee market. And then I ask, if there's a storm in a particular country, which curve do you think will be affected? Will it be the demand curve or the supply curve?
Miss, I believe it would be the supply.
Supply, anybody else agrees with, I think that was Jay. So that is correct. So it would be the supply curve that is affected, especially if the yeah, sorry about that, guys. So it would be the supply that is affected because this is a producing country. If it were that they were just consumers, it would have specified in the question that, you know, they would have been importing this particular good. But once you have a supply and demand curve, that means the country is actually participating in the production of the good. All right. So we would have agreed that the supply curve would be affected, but the big question is, would there be an increase or decrease in this supply?
Miss, a decrease in supply.
Yeah, because with a storm or hurricane, it couldn't be anything positive. So we're all agreeing that it's a decrease in supply. When supply decreases, where does the curve move, or does the curve even move at all? Guys, remember, it's not a lot of us and we want to be able to understand these concepts. So if you don't interact, I won't be able to understand whether or not you're getting these explanations. So please, I'm asking you participate, all right?
Miss, would it be an upward shift to
So it
the
would
a shift to the left?
shift to the left. All right, great. Anybody else would like to add anything? All right, so you are correct, Jay. So I'm going to draw 4 little graphs here to explain some concepts to you. So there are things that affect demand, supply outside of the price, as we would have indicated in the previous question. Things such as cost of production on the supply side, innovation or technology. On the demand side, it would be maybe substitutes, income, anything like that. So we're looking at the supply curve now. And I want you guys to make a note of the difference between a movement in the supply curve versus a movement along the supply curve. So there's a huge difference. A lot of persons usually get it complicated, or they don't usually understand which one to refer to when certain questions propose certain things. So movement along a curve can only be caused by one thing, and that thing is price. So let me label our graphs. So PQ. In the meantime, Jay, if you're able to write on the whiteboard, you can finish this graph for us while I'm explaining this. So PQ. Q. The big one to the left, that one. PQ. All right, so as I said, movement along the curve, it's pretty much the simplest one. It's affecting your supply, and the only factor that can affect supply and cause a movement along the curve is price. So just as I was explaining before, if we have 10, that doesn't look like a 10. All right, 16. We're at point A, which is here. For some reason, price might have fallen and it went down to 8. It went down to 8. I can't write an 8 with this thing. So it went down to 8. You realize that once the price changes, we're on the same curve. It's just that we've moved from a point that's further up to a point that's further down. It's basically movement along the curve. Only thing that can affect movement along the curve is price. The price changes, the quantity changes, and we're still on the same supply curve. If there's another factor outside of price, that factor will cause a shift, whether upward or downward, in the supply curve. Again, any factor outside of price will cause a shift in the supply curve. For example, in this case, a hurricane or a storm, that will basically reduce the amount that you're able to supply. A reduction in supply refers to, graphically, a leftward shift in your supply curve, and that would be here. So this is your number 1 curve. This is your number 2 curve. A leftward shift, that means reduction in supply. So if it is that we have a few chains of restaurants or chains of factory, 2 of our factories got burned down for some reason, where production has fallen drastically, we're suffering a bit, output decrease, all of that. That would lead to a shift in your supply curve to the left, versus if we're expanding, we just got a loan from a particular financial institution to invest in 2 more factories. We're able to produce more goods at a lower cost. Referring back to economies of scale, your supply curve would shift downwards. So increase, the curve moves to the right. Decrease, the curve moves to the left. Again, there's an increase or a positive impact in any other factor other than the price, the curve would move to the right. If there is a decrease or a negative effect on any other factor outside of price, your curve would move to the left. And the same is true for demand. So let me do the demand here. So demand is down. Oh, that's terrible. The demand is downward sloping. Again, if price changes, as we know, there's an inverse relationship between price and the quantity demanded. So price goes up, we're not going to pay as much. So we're not going to buy as much as before. Price goes down, we say, all right, wholesale style, cheaper, we'll buy more. If, for example, we had an increase in our income, maybe you were getting maybe like 3,000 a month for your little stipend, now you're getting 5 or 10, you're able to buy more things. So your demand curve would move upwards. And again, that's to the right. If, for example, something happened and you weren't able to earn as much as the other week or the other month, your demand curve would move to the left. In this case, that's downwards, which is here. So those are the concepts behind these graphs that you are often seeing with 2, 3, 4 demand curves or 2, 3 supply curves. There's usually a ripple effect where, oh, demand is either affected or supply is affected, but you have to make a note of what is affecting the demand or supply. If it's price, we know that we're not going to draw an extra curve, we're just doing a movement. If it's any other factor, we definitely know we need to add another line to our graph. Everybody clear on those 4 small explanations? Or we have some questions? Persons who were saying they have a difficulty with graphs, do you understand? Or you need some more explanation? Remember, guys, it's a pretty open space, just us here, so let me know. Miss, I understand. All right, great. Anybody else that had a graph issue don't get it? Let us know, guys, because we don't want to move on or get into something more technical and you don't understand. And CSEC always has a graph question. Always, always, always. So it's better to capitalize on these things just to ensure that, you know, if I can get all of the graph question correct, that's at least 1 question out of what, 4 or 5? All right, so completing this now. So we agree that it's a shift in the demand curve, not demand, sorry, supply curve. And it's a shift to the left because the supply is affected and it's decreasing. So we can label this as S1. So before we would have stated that our equilibrium was where this supply curve meets the original demand curve. And the reason why we're not going to touch the demand curve is there was no indication in the question that says that, oh, people stopped by coffee because of the storm. Or people bought more coffee because of the storm. No indication was given that consumers' preferences has changed. Hence the reason why we're still using the old demand curve and we're not changing anything on it. All right, guys. All right, so we would have introduced a new supply curve and we're going to need to locate our new equilibrium. So this would be Q1. This is our Q1. Q1, sorry. P1. P2. All right, so based on these results, what did you guys notice? What did you guys notice? And we're referring, when I say what did you notice, in terms of the quantity that is being produced and the price. Oh,
You
Mr.
could say,
Go ahead.
when I look at all of these curves, right, you can see that it's not necessarily the factors of production, such as, well, land, labor, enterprise, capital, that would affect the quantity being supplied, right? But really the price, because if something is more expensive to produce for the supplier, and then they have to pass on the price to the consumer, obviously less is going to be in demand. I also think that some of even though the price might raise, it depends on the item available, such as like water. Water will probably be inelastic because we need water to survive. So that's what I kind of understand a little bit about the curves and stuff.
All right. So your explanation is not wrong. So when you mentioned before the factors that would have been affected, for example, the main one in this case would be land. Because remember, if you're planting coffee, then you might have acres upon acres upon acres where these lands are covered with coffee. A storm comes through and then maybe wipe out 2, 3, 4 acres of that land. You have to basically go in with repairs to reap, remove the debris, all of that. So yes, the supply would decrease. The quantity as well would decrease. As you mentioned, JJ, these companies, they tend not to absorb these costs by themselves. So they would try to pass these costs to these consumers in the form of higher prices. So that's the technical explanation, and the graphical explanation here would show you that quantity is reduced and the price goes up.
I
So
agree.
beautiful explanation. That would have given you a complete 4 or maybe 3 marks if they had asked you to give a written example. Great.
My
So,
issue with the price in general, I find is that, like, I recently went to purchase some SIM cards, and I found that the price of these SIM cards are just expensive. It shot up like by $15 within a year, and I just feel like I get a sense when I look at economics that economics, and in my opinion, is basically, in order to gain something of equal value must be lost or exchanged or transferred. But it's sometimes very difficult to get that equality because we're exchanging different products and services and using different sorts of systems where I don't think it can give an equal outcome to both parties. in cases. I think it just struggles to find that
That
balance.
balance.
It seems impossible to achieve that balance.
And in truth and in fact, it is impossible because value is very subjective. I might think, all right, maybe a SIM card is worth $20 to me. But when the company does their cost and analysis and then they say, oh, these SIM cards, based on what we're paying to produce them, ship them to a particular location, we can't be charging $20. We have to maybe charge $30. So as I said, these things that we call value are prices. They are pretty subjective. And you would get into that when you move on to like how money came about, how before it was just a medium of exchange where I would exchange something that I would think is somewhat valuable. But to you, it still might not be as valuable as what you are exchanging. Hence the reason why money was introduced. But at the end of the day, it's still not a perfect medium of transaction to say it equates right across the board where I value it this way and the other party values it the same way. So the point you made where it's pretty much impossible, it is because value is very, very subjective. So I hope that answers that question. And if there are no other comments, we're going to move on to the other question. I hope you guys really understand this graph thing because as I said, you always get a graph question. It might not be a graph where it's about supply and demand. It might be something where it refers to opportunity costs. And we're going to look at that further down. So if you're able to, please take a look at your graphs, know what causes a shift versus what causes a movement for each. And with that, you'll be better able to understand and answer these questions.
So, Miss, I did a paper 3 for econ last week. And throughout the years I saw for paper 3s when I was doing past papers, they didn't bring a curves and they brought curves on that exam. So I agree with your point about they always bring a curve. Maybe they might bring it for this year, but you should definitely be prepared.
Yeah, you guys should be prepared. And as I said, it's not always a demand and supply curve. Sometimes they usually come in with the opportunity cost curve or what we call comparative advantage and stuff like that. So please, guys, if we don't get to cover it in the session, look over your graphs. And for me, when I was doing economics in CSEC and CAPE, graphs were a huge thing for me. Even in university, like graph was a huge thing for me. Like once I understood a particular graph, I could answer any question pertaining to that topic with a graph, or even sometimes even if it's not a graph question. Because sometimes when you can picture things, it's easier to, to say, all right, before I might not would have been able to say, all right, the price went up and the quantity went down, but being able to draw the graph and say, oh, so it shifted to the left and then the price went up, you're better able to see and explain what you're trying to convey. So that's another concept as well you guys can use in your exam, even if it's not a graph question, if you're able to draw a graph for the question, just to help yourself explain better, go ahead and do so. So we're going to move on to the next question. Let me stop sharing this. All right. So the next part. So identify 2 characteristics of each of the following market structures. All right, so we're moving on to macroeconomics now. So, macroeconomics basically has to do with looking at things from the bigger picture. So you're basically looking at a country instead of just looking at a specific situation. So perfect competition, as the name suggests, pretty much perfect. Everything is supposed to be, similar to some extent. So with perfect competition, you have many sellers, many buyers. The goods are pretty similar. They are not exactly the same. So they might have maybe a little variance, but they're pretty much the same. For example, toilet paper. They have so many brands of toilet paper. Some feel thin, some feel a little bit thicker, but it's still toilet paper. There's no barrier to entry or exit. So if a company, just wishes to drop out, they can. If a company just started and they want to enter the market, they can. Because if we want to build a toilet paper company, I don't think we need much license. You just need to get it passed to ensure that it's, the regular, to ensure that it's fit to be used by humans, and then you're good to go. So the last thing is that the price is market determined. So when you're looking at these market structures, you're always asked about, I think, these 4 aspects. So are there many sellers or buyers, or are the buyers few, sellers many? Which is it? So as I said, in perfect competition, many buyers, many sellers. They usually ask you for a description of the goods. So is it a similar good? Is it identical? Is it unique? So stuff like that. Is the market easy to enter and exit? In this case, for perfect competition, it is. And how is the price determined? So there are 2 extremes. Perfect competition is like the extreme to the left, and then you have monopoly on the other end of the stick. So for a monopoly, there's only one seller or supplier. Only one person producing this good or service, but you have tons of persons consuming it. They don't usually have competitors.
Miss, I think one of the issues I think happens in economics with anybody that has a good product, eventually they even though they are not a monopoly, they behave in a monopolistic way because they want to, earn more money. They want to be dominant on the market, which I think is something like human nature. Like I hear that Google, for example, has to pay fees for keeping competitors at bay because it's the main search engine. So I feel like perfect competition, and particularly, let's say we were selling parties, all of us in the class, and I realized that, we're all selling the same parties. I noticed something that I could change to my party. And then I said I get more buyers than you. I might try certain tactics that might make me seem as monopolistic.
Yes, and that would be another market structure. So as I said, these are the 2 extremes. So between perfect competition and monopoly, we have what we call monopolistic and oligopoly. So what you just described with the party where you're adding something unique just to stand out a bit, that would be monopolistic, because you're not there at the monopoly stage, but you have certain characteristics of that market structure. So those are the general characteristics. As I said, it only asks you for 2, but I listed all of them just for discussion purposes. So you can, if afterwards you want me to send the slides, you can, and then you can choose which one you'd like to use for your answer. So this is what we were discussing before, JJ, where I was referring to monopolistic. So it's basically an in-between. So the goods aren't identical, but they're not necessarily totally unique. So they're what we call differentiated. So you have something a little unique that makes you stand out over the other person that's producing something similar. These prices aren't usually market determined. They are usually determined by the seller while taking into consideration their competitors. That's another difference. So remember, before the perfect competition, the price is market determined, but for monopoly, it was the seller who was determining the price. It, as I said, has both traits, and something to know that in the short run, their main goal is to maximize profits. And in the short term, they're acting like a monopoly. So I'm going to repeat that. In the short term, their main goal is to maximize profits, and in the short term, they're acting like a monopoly. In the long run, over a time, when everybody realizes that, all right, he's doing this, let me try and do this as well. Over time, it's going to do what we call break even, where the marginal cost is going to equal to the marginal revenue, and it's going to appear as if the market structure is acting in a perfectly competitive state. So again, short term, the aim is to maximize profits, and it looks like a monopoly from that aspect. Over a period of time, the structure will break even, marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, and it will look like a perfectly competitive market.
Mr. You think CXC is a monopoly?
Not necessarily. I think it would be in the sense of high school education or certification. Because now most of these businesses, once you go to apply for a job or anything, they're going to ask you, do you have CSEC or CAPE? So in the Caribbean, definitely it would be a monopoly, like for CSEC specifically, because not everybody does CAPE, but for CSEC specifically, I would think of them as a monopoly in the education field. All right. Next question. So I had left this question pretty open because, as I said, I wanted us to have a discussion. So just to get an understanding, and so, as I told you guys before, certain questions, there's no wrong or right answer, it's just how you explain yourself. And these are one of those questions. So I might answer it a certain way, somebody else answers it a certain way, and we all got the 4 marks. So using economic concepts, so that's something to note. They're asking you to use certain terms to explain the problem created when community members are asked to make a voluntary month contribution for public internet access. What does this scenario describes to you? Anybody? All right, once you hear public internet access, sorry, what comes to mind?
Well, everybody would be sharing sharing the internet service. What I get the impression of is that there may be some who will put more money than others, and they may cause issues as the others feel that they're going to use a service that others didn't contribute for. And I look at Trinidad as, well, with the influx of immigrants where they come to the country, but they don't pay taxes. And yet they use services that require taxes. So that's what I get a little bit of it.
And that is correct. So that's your explanation, and you're 100% correct. So you would get the 4 marks. 1, well, maybe 3, because you wouldn't have mentioned the actual economic concept, and that would be the problem of public goods. All right. So they ask you to use economic terms, so make sure you're stating what exactly you're defending, but your explanation was on point. It's public internet. I am not going to pay, while JJ will pay his voluntary contribution diligently. I'm there at home every day on the Wi-Fi. JJ maybe only uses 2 to 3 hours out of this public internet. So there's the issue where persons who are paying less or not paying at all are able to partake of these goods and services. And it might also lead to the other persons who are actually paying not being able to access their goods and services. So as I said, it's the problem of public goods. And either way you explain it, just please state one, it's the problem of public good. That would be 1 mark. The fact that persons are able to partake of the goods without paying, and persons who are paying might not be able to access. And you know that disconnect between those two will lead to a problem. So that's it for that question. Moving right along, because we're almost out of time. Indicate whether the following goods or services are merit goods or public goods. So we just spoke about public goods. So public goods are non-rivalrous or non-excludable. That means I can't stop you from using it regardless. Me partaking of that particular good shouldn't restrict you from partaking, but that's not always the case. So that definition is kind of what we usually refer to as subjective. Certain situations it might apply, certain situations it might not. So a primary school provided by a private organization. So this would be a merit good. Oh, I didn't define what's a merit good. So a merit good is basically a good that is needed, but it's not necessarily provided readily. So education, as you know, is important, but the fact that it's provided by a private organization, that limits the access to that particular good. The National Army, nobody can be restricted from using that. Healthcare is a merit good because not everybody has access to it. It's there, but we don't have all access. Street lights, lighting of a village along the main street, anybody can pass and use that, whether, for example, we paid taxes or didn't pay taxes. So think of it as where public goods, you can't stop anybody from using it, while with merit goods, there is some restriction to accessing that goods. All right. All right, so assume there is no government in the town of Roadville. The table shows the demand and supply schedule, as well as the marginal cost benefits of road repair. The marginal social benefit is the total benefit to society from consuming additional units of a good. So again, let me read the last sentence because that is very critical. So the marginal social benefit is the total benefit to society for consuming additional units of a good. So identify the cause of the market failure in the road repair. So again, it's similar to the public Wi-Fi just now. It's a public good. So there's a market failure because it's the property of the public and it's non-rivalrous and it's non-excludable. So you can't stop people from using it. The only thing you maybe can do, for example, like put a cost on it, but it did not state, for example, that it's a toll road or anything. It just says road repair. So using the information from the table, explain the market failure identified. So this is a pretty long explanation, but as I said, there are always 4 points. So market failure, we know that there is some disequilibrium in the market. Supply is not meeting demand. Persons are requiring maybe 10 and the market is only able to produce 5. So that's what the first part is basically saying, just a simple definition for market failure. In this case, they would have mentioned our marginal benefit. So marginal benefits is basically the total benefits, as they said, to society. So if you would have noted, let me go back. Look at the values for the demand, because your demand curve is also a benefits curve. So we're looking at the demand curve along with the marginal social benefits values, sorry. So as you realize, they are way larger. So that's basically telling you that society is demanding way more than what the market is able to produce. Again, I'm going to repeat, the demand curve is also a benefits curve. They're showing you the values for a particular society and it's larger than what the demand curve is. That's telling you that the country or economy is demanding an amount that's greater than what the market is able to produce. So in this case, it's road repair. That means persons are requiring more road use. So in this case, we'll refer to it as traffic. So there's a lot of traffic on the road because guess what? Persons are using the road a lot, but the demand is not able to meet that requirement that society has. Hence, you might be in traffic 2, 3, 4 hours. So just like we were mentioning before, where there are persons who are actually contributing and they're benefiting, yes, but because of that influx of persons who are not contributing and still benefiting, we're still stuck in traffic. So going over that, you identify that there's a disequilibrium. The disequilibrium exists because what the society is demanding versus what is being presented by the market, there's a gap. And then you'll explain that gap to say, all right, we need more roads, but at the same time, persons who are using the roads aren't contributing. So there's an influx of unpaying users. So there's still that demand outside of the persons who are actually paying. So we are stuck in traffic. All right. As I said, I'll send you these slides. So if you're unable to take down the explanation, you can make a note of them later. If we have no questions.
Will you send us in the class, in the group WhatsApp group, or?
Yes, in the WhatsApp group.
Thank you.
All right. I'm guessing there's no other questions for this one. Read up on market failures, guys, because we would have only touched on, I think, one. Yeah, only one, because we only would have mentioned the problem of public good. Read up on market failures because they usually not necessarily plainly state that this is market failure or market failure, and then they ask you a question related to that. They usually term it as there's a disequilibrium in the market. For just like the question before, what is this disequilibrium referred to as, stuff like that. But they're hoping that you actually know that when we refer to a disequilibrium in the market, we're referring to a market failure. And there are also graphs for market failure as well. So look into that as well. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever seen anywhere you're asked to draw market failure graphically, but just in.
For a question like this, do we have to define what the 4 qualities are? When they just say listed, you just have to state it. Because if I say acceptability, does the examiner know what I mean? Or do I have to state what exactly? Because you have a medium of exchange and you have to choose between medium of exchange or acceptability.
All right, so when they usually ask you to list, I would suggest just listing. Because sometimes your understanding of the term might not be the actual explanation of that term. For example, acceptability, medium of exchange. Persons might look at acceptability in that it's a universal unit. So and that's not wrong either, but as I said, usually when they ask you to list something, just list it without explaining. But these that I would have added were just to explain to you guys specifically what I mean by each term. That answers your question, JJ?
Yes, yes.
All right, great. So they ask you for 4, but I would have listed more than 4. So divisibility, it should be able to, well, list 4 qualities of money. Sorry. So divisibility, we shouldn't be able to not find quote unquote change. So they're basically stages. So we have cents in some countries, they have dollars. And then, you know, these dollars range where they have in the tens, the hundreds, the thousands. Acceptability, it should be able to be used as a medium of exchange. Meaning, if I go to the store to buy something, the storekeeper shouldn't be telling me that, oh, we don't accept JMD or Trinidadian dollars or US dollars in some countries. But if it's in your country, then they should be able to accept it. All right. Portability should be easy to carry. Shouldn't be walking with my money and it's breaking my back unless it's, you know, maybe some millions. But it should be able to be carried easily and it should be able to be concealed. So durability, money should be long lasting. I shouldn't be able to maybe get wet accidentally and then when I take out the money to pay my fare, there's no money, just melted away in my pocket. So long lasting. Scarcity is also a very, very important quality of money because you know you can't have an infinite quality, because with that, if we're able to just produce, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Zimbabwe situation. Anybody? Or no? So
Familiar with Zimbabwe, that damn. Maybe you can explain this to me best. Like, I think with Zimbabwe is that their money is like in the hundreds of millions of dollars for a bill or something like that, where their money has very little value. How does this occur? Where it's at such a rate where you have to get so many monetary bills and I have a whole $100,000 bill to buy basic commodities. How does this happen?
So I think right now there may be at a $1 trillion unit. So they have a single paper money that's worth 1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. They would have gone to this state due to inflation though. So inflation, it's not necessarily something that is induced by the consumer, but in most cases, it has to do with the money supply of the country. So in Zimbabwe's case, they would have experienced inflation, and to conquer that inflation, the government at the time thought that, why don't we just increase the money supply so people have more money to spend on goods and services? But at the same time, they did not look at the long-term effect of increasing the money supply, because as you would have read maybe further down in economics, that increasing money supply does lead to inflation. Even though it's a corrective measure, it does lead to inflation in the long run. Hence the reason why most countries, they would tell you that, oh, we're adjusting our interest rates to fight inflation, or they're doing other things. They prefer to do all that instead of changing their money supply. But
Miss, what's causing the inflation? What's caused the inflation in their state to such a large extent? I know of the case with Venezuela a little bit, where they say Venezuela was borrowing a lot of money or spending out a lot on public service, but operating on a deficit budget. But I mean, to such an extent where money has no value, it's very concerning.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, it's with the fault of the government, because they wouldn't have looked at the long-term effects of certain things. So yes, they would have met a recession and they would have chosen to increase the money supply. But that's the solution that they always chose over the years from, I think it's what, 2010, from maybe 2008,
I
sometime around
understand.
that time.
So they print more money into the towards in the
Yes,
economy. And when
the
you print more
country.
money, what people have more money to spend, but people say that when you push out more money, people have more money to spend. So it shouldn't cause inflation.
That's the idea, but the thing is, if persons have more money to spend, right? Don't you think goods and services prices will also increase? Because remember, the persons are going to want to capitalize on this more money to spend. So businesses are going to try to make profit by hiking up their prices. These goods and
Oh,
services, exactly, these goods and services. Now, remember, inflation is basically a
so,
huge, a change in price over a period of time. So these businesses hike up their prices, then now we, the consumers, need more money to buy these goods and services. And the cycle continues where they supply us with more money, the prices go up, they supply us with more money, the prices go up, they supply us with more money, the prices go up. So that's how they ended up in that situation. So yeah, as I said, like money, increasing the money supply, it is a corrective measure, but when it is done to that extent where it's being repeated, it does lead to what we call hyperinflation.
I've
And
heard of
that's
this. I've heard some people say we should adopt the USD as the currency in the Caribbean, considering that regardless, we still have to exchange all the monies to USD to purchase anything outside of the Caribbean.
um I'm a bit against that, reason being because remember, currencies can fail. I think when you move further into economics, if it is that you want to study economics, you're going to reach a point where you're going to study like the financial sector to see when these banks would have existed long before. They had quite a few other currencies before the US dollar became the dominant one, and those currencies had failed. So I don't think we should be over reliant on one particular unit of exchange, because with that, if that one unit fails, then the whole world economy is going to fail. So I think we should stick to our diversity where, yes, you can peg your
I
local
just
to US. Go ahead.
I I agree with you, miss, and I think I see that the Caribbean has is that what I was talking about Trinidad is that it's like I'm kind of bringing some things off topic to it, but it ties into economics whereby for menial items we still import it into the Caribbean. So there are some items which we will have to import, such as vehicles, heavy duty trucks and whatnot, right? But
Yeah.
certainly minor items, we do not manufacture those items here, which means that we have to deplete more of our foreign exchange, which creates scarcity, which leads to the black market where people sell foreign exchange at an inflated price. And I read about Nigel Clark, so I like some of the policies that he implements in Jamaica. Some of them where I see the reserves of Jamaica has risen. I like his move with the Enhurst Trust. Seems a very smart, well put together guy. And I just feel like for us from school, the socialization is always to be professionals rather than becoming people who control factors of production. So we will look at students who will become doctors, lawyers, engineers, which are needed, right? But you don't need that many of them in a society, certainly at the rate that we produce, because we have all of these people here, but they're not producing stuff that could be export. They manage stuff. But if you like look at having a workforce of students from Trinidad that can work in factories. So let's say you invite companies from Apple or Samsung, just in hindsight, and you tell them manufacture phones here. Phones that we have to import for hundreds or for tens of thousands of dollars becomes cheaper because it's made here. And these are initiatives I think governments can do to bring the labor to here and have people work in those industries to drive down the price. Because what I see is that you have to work for more and more money now, miss. You have to get more and more educated, more and more business, and it's not sustainable. And I find that to be very problematic, especially at the rate.
And it is problematic for the Caribbean because imagine moving, I'm going to go, sorry to be strange for the other persons, but it's a pretty good discussion for you to actually understand what's happening in the world. So thinking about the fact that you would have been moving from quote unquote slavery time, where you were producing the raw materials, you were exporting these raw materials to the point now where you're not producing anymore. You're basically importing these goods where you were producing. So that's one of the major things where I think the economy has fallen to a dependent state, where it's not just like, for example, because the technical stuff you can understand, they are importing. But for example, like raw materials, even food, most of you might not know some of the foods that you eat and you might think, oh, this is local potato or local banana. It's not. Most of them are imported. They're from other countries who maybe artificially plant them in some greenhouse or something like that. So these Caribbean countries fail to understand that they need to move from a point where they are not depending on these countries for just everything, because they are depending on them for everything. Investments, raw materials, everything.
That's such a good point, Miss. How you're able to tie Caribbean history with where we did control the factors of production throughout slavery. May not in terms of the selling, but we were producing. Seeing that we were slaves, we learned the techniques of crop rearing, monoculture and whatnot, and we abandoned those things now where we have to import the items at a high price.
Sugar production, bananas, stuff like that, potatoes and stuff like that, we were actually producing and exporting to other countries. But if you check your labels now, you aren't eating anything from your country anymore. Nope. Most of them are, it can be within the Caribbean, but it's still not a case where majority is from the Caribbean. Because even these goods that are produced in the Caribbean, they still have to get their raw materials outside of the Caribbean. So it's a pretty interesting thing to note that we've come so far, but yet still we are so far.
We're not gonna get there.
But yeah. And there's always a case, guys, where you can use real life examples to justify your explanations. So if a question comes up and you may not understand what they're saying, but if you understand particularly something that's happening in society, and you say, oh, maybe I can use this to explain what I'm trying to say. So you can always explore that as well. All right, we're moving to the financial sector. So this is pretty straightforward. It's just the firms and institutions within our economy that provide financial services to both commercial and retail customers. So as I was mentioning before, banking, investment, insurance, real estate, all those fall under our financial sector. And it has a very great purpose in terms of monetary issuance. So as you know, these banks, they usually control our money supply. The central bank governs these commercial facilities, but these commercial banks are usually the driving factor. So their interest rate affects our inflation. So sometimes I'm not sure if you're able to remember, but I think it was maybe few years, maybe during the pandemic, when a lot of these central banks were basically cutting their interest rate because of the pandemic, just to ensure that persons are able to have a certain amount of money in their accounts to spend. So, and that is another way to, let me see, fight inflation. So instead of increasing the money supply like Zimbabwe, you can fluctuate the interest rate just to have persons have more money in their pocket. And as I said, increasing interest rate doesn't have to be just for loans, because interest is a very universal thing. It doesn't just apply to loans, but it also applies to your savings, because remember, you save money in your bank accounts. These banks are supposed to pay you a certain amount for holding your money. So that's another way as well, where they try to increase
So
your
Miss, one of the
spend.
things I did, well, so what I did, I got a card. My first bank card was given to me was, I think, was something that young people could do as they're transitioning from school, is you can put a spending limit on your card. Where, okay, so for me, I'll be personal, I have a spending limit of about 60,000 GMB. So whatever excess income you earn, you can leave it there on the card, but you can spend within that. So you can impose a restriction on your card and try to live within that budget of that for the month. And looking at it now, it was a pretty smart, I think, prudent decision at that time. So
Yeah, I think nowadays it's pretty critical for persons to understand, like investing, saving, understanding money is very, very important going forward. And studying economics does help with that, because you understand the value of your money, the purpose that you serve in terms of earning and spending. So I think that was a pretty good move. And for the other persons who aren't answering or contributing, it's pretty wise to take into consideration maybe opening an investment account or doing something like JJ, where you guys put a limit on your card, just to ensure that you're not spending out of beyond your limits, and you're also preparing for anything to come. So yeah, so we're looking at B. So Anne goes to the commercial bank that we were just talking about. To one, withdraw money. You guys know the functions of a bank, right? I'm not sure if that's CAPE or C6, but you can correct me if that's on the syllabus. So a commercial bank has several functions. So does a credit union, a building society, a development bank. All of those have various functions. Not sure if it's a part of the syllabus, as I said, or that's CAPE, but if it is, read up on that. So one of the functions of a commercial bank is to take deposits. So Anne goes to the commercial bank to withdraw some money from her account to buy a dress. The price of the dress is $150. Sounds a lot for a dress, but I hope that's GMD and not USD. She also checks the amount she has saved towards buying a house in 5 years. She will need to take a loan to buy the house, which she will repay in the future. So they want us to identify the 4 functions of money and state how Anne's action relate to each. So this question values 4 marks. 8 marks. Go ahead.
Miss, how are you sending the slides for us?
They'll be sent in the WhatsApp group.
Miss, which WhatsApp group?
The New Jamaica Foundation Economics WhatsApp group.
Oh, Miss, can I be added to that group, please?
Let me see. Let me see if I'm an admin.
Okay,
No,
Miss.
I'm not an admin. Leave your number in the chat and I'll send it to our admin to add to the group.
Okay, Miss, and for the recording, Miss.
Yes, it will be posted on YouTube a little bit later today.
All right, Miss. Well, I had to go and prepare for the maths. So I'm going to leave soon. So let me put my number.
All right, no problem.
And thanks for all this help.
No problem. See you later for the math session.
Yes, goodbye.
All right, bye. So if anybody else would like to leave, just let me know. All right. And I'll be a part of the math session later. So I'll be seeing you guys if you're doing math this year as well. All right, identify 4 functions of money and state how. So I had identified the functions, but I had left the section blank that would basically say state and action related to each. So store of value. So I'm going to explain for each term, and I want you guys to tell me which action Anne is doing to reference each. All right, so store of value basically refers to, as I said, taking deposits. So am I able to store my money and it still retains the value it has now, and it's still valued the same amount? So if I have $10,000 today, will it be $10,000 tomorrow? Excluding the thought of inflation. So which action is referring to store of value, the function of store of value? Guys.
Miss, so I sent you the number. I'm not sure if when I leave, it's going to delete. I'm not sure.
Let me see if I can get it from the chat. Give me a minute, guys. Let me just send it to our admin. Anybody would like to attempt the store of value?
The money has a certain value that can be used to purchase goods. So the store value of money means that each monetary note has an assigned value. You might maybe say an assigned purchasing power, or its ability to purchase a particular unit or amount of units for store value.
Yeah, so which action that Anne is doing would be to store value?
Purchasing interest for 120.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. Say that again for me,
I would
JJ.
say purchasing the dress for 150 or being interested in it. She's aware of the price.
Guess again. Yes, it would be the amount she saved for the house. Remember, it's store of value. So it's basically that your money is able to retain its value over a period of time. So as I said, you have $10,000 today. Will you have $10,000 tomorrow? Yes, you will, excluding the thought of inflation. So the 150 that you referenced, JJ, would be the unit of account. So you're able to just plainly state that this is valued that exact amount. So for the unit of account, it would be the price of the dress is 150. Medium of exchange, she's going to buy a dress. So she's able to exchange that 150 for the dress. And the other party is willing to accept that amount. And deferred payment would be in the form of a loan. So she's going to take out a loan. She's going to pay, but not now, but sometime in the future, hence deferred payment. Everyone is clear on those 4 functions?
Yes, miss.
Great. All right, I'm a bit over, so I'm going to run through real quick for this one. I really wanted to cover. I'm just running through to see. All right, I'm going to run through the comparative advantage real quick, and then we try to have a discussion about the trade agreements, because that was one of the pain points for you guys. So Somerville, Maryville and Somerville can both produce banana chips and chocolate. Somerville uses less labor than Maryville to produce each of the goods. So the opportunity cost for producing 1 unit of each good for each country are listed below in table 2. So they would have given us the opportunity cost for producing each good for each country, and they want us to answer these questions based on the values presented in that table. So identify the country that has the comparative advantage. So you know that comparative advantage has to do with opportunity cost, whereas absolute advantage has to do with your total output. So in this case, comparative advantage for banana chips would be the country that has the smallest value on the banana chips, and that would be Maryville. Everyone seen that? So on the banana chips, we have 1/3 and 2. We have 1/3 and 2, so Maryville has, well, they give up less in order to produce a particular banana chip. So they only give up 1/3 chocolate to produce 1 banana chips, whereas Somerville would have to give up 2 chocolates to produce a single banana chip. So Maryville has the advantage when it comes on to banana chips. As for chocolate, it's the opposite. Somerville now has the advantage to produce chocolate at a cheaper cost when comparing banana chips, all right? So remember, comparative advantage or opportunity cost, they don't usually refer to things as maybe money or anything like that. It's usually in comparison to a particular good. So the formula, just to note, the formula for comparative advantage is the quantity of a particular goods over the quantity of the other goods. And as you can see in this table, I would have made a note. So you realize they have 1/3 chocolate here. So definitely we know that chocolate is our base unit. So 1 banana chip, 3 chocolate, hence we end up with 1/3. You would have noticed as well that I would have had like a bold 1, 2, 3, 1 here. These 1 or 2 are these bold numbers refer to the total output for the particular good. So Maryville is producing 1 banana chip. Maryville is producing 3 chocolates. Somerville is producing 2 banana chip. Somerville is producing 1 chocolate. And these values, as I said, refer to the total output. The values that were given to you in the table refer to the opportunity costs. So that's something to note, guys. Please ensure that you pay attention to the values that you're given in the table, because for I and II, where they ask you about the comparative advantage, you can just look at the table and know. But for 3 and 4, where it asks you to identify the country that has the absolute advantage, you would have to do a little calculation to find that. Because absolute advantage, as I said, has to do with just the country who produces more of the particular good. And in this case, this situation basically changes, because before Maryville had the comparative advantage in banana chips, but we're noting now that they're able to produce 3 chocolates. So they have the absolute advantage when it comes on to chocolate, versus Maryville, well, Somerville now, who would have had the comparative advantage for chocolate, but they now have the absolute advantage for banana chips. Everyone seen how we would have arrived at the 1 and the 3 and the 2 and the 1?
Miss, could you please go over it?
All right, no problem. So as I said, the value in the table, this table that's on the right, is your comparative advantage. Your comparative advantage formula is, the formula is the quantity of A over the quantity of B. Sorry, this is so terrible, guys. The quantity of B, and this will give you the comparative advantage for B. So you realize B is in the denominator and it's the goods that you're referring to. So in this case, we have 1/3. So we're trying to break it apart just to know how much banana chips and chocolate Maryville is producing. So 1/3, and it has chocolate beside it. So we know chocolate is in the denominator. So we know that they're producing 1 banana chips and 3 chocolates. Hence, we end up with 1 here and 3 here. And if you do the same for Maryville, we're still at Maryville, we're going to do the same for banana chips. So if they're producing 1 banana chips and 3 chocolate, we're not going to put banana chips in the denominator because we have banana chips here. So 1B, and at the top, you have 3C. And we end up with 3 here. And this is the same 3 that we have in the table. So everybody see how we basically broke apart the values from the comparative advantage to get the total output. Or it's still unclear? I'm guessing silence is that it's good now. And you would do the same for Somerville. So it would be 2/1. That's another way to write 2. And it has chocolate beside it. So we know that it's 1 chocolate at the bottom. You would do the same over here. Half is basically telling you you have 2 banana chips and 1 chocolate. And that's pretty much it for that table. And they ask you, suggest the country that should export banana chips. So exporting usually takes into consideration the comparative advantage. So you would just basically state whichever country that has the comparative advantage in banana chips, they should produce it or export it, sorry. And that would be, in our case, Maryville. All right. I hope there are no other questions. Are we good, guys?
Yes, miss. Thank you.
All right, no problem. All right, so we're going to have a brief discussion around trade agreements, unemployment. So I'm going to be pretty quick here. So we know that with globalization, a lot of barriers re trade and exchange have been lifted. One such is that persons are able to exchange goods and services cheaper and faster due to these agreements. These agreements are usually referred to as bilateral or multilateral agreements, trade agreements, that is. So as the name suggests, it's usually an agreement between 2 if it's bilateral, or multiple if it's multilateral. And these agreements are usually garnered around just ensuring that goods and services are able to be exchanged between different countries, companies, without much restrictions. So that's basically the difference. The huge difference is that one happens between two countries or organization, while the other is usually 3 or more. All right, so knowing the definitions are also important because for this question, they basically give you the definition for certain terms and tell you to identify them. So the increase in a country's real GDP and services over a period of time, we refer to that as economic growth. Some persons might term it as real GDP or increase in real GDP. That is still economic growth. A set of economic reforms that a country must adhere to in order to secure a loan from the IMF or the World Bank. Those are referred to as structural adjustments. A type of trade bloc or agreement between nations that allow products, labor, and technology to be freely moved. This is a type of trade agreement and is referred to as the single market. All right, so there are different types of unemployment. As we know, functional, cyclical, structural, and these employments usually can be depicted graphically, so you can look at graph for those as well. So Mary lost her job as a travel agent due to an increase in the popularity of online booking websites. So this is structural unemployment. It usually occurs due to a change in maybe technology or the processes that a businesses use, and they no longer require like person services. This often happens to factory workers. So they're able to increase their productivity maybe by getting a new equipment. So some factory workers are laid off. A solution to this would be to get retrained in a particular skill that is demanded or don't specialize. We would have referred to labor division before. This is a resulting effect. When persons specialize, they often find it very difficult if push come to shove, as they would say, and they would have to leave their job. The skill is not transferable to another department or maybe another industry. So it's usually advised that persons diversify their skills. Yes, you might specify here, but also have some experience here as well. That would be a solution for, what's her name? Mary. So Patrick was laid off as sales decreased because there was an economic downturn. So once there is an economic downturn, we refer to it as a cyclical unemployment. So once there's an economic downturn, because these things cannot be affected in every economy, there are going to be high points and there are going to be low points. As I said, retraining or being diverse in your skills is always a solution. So if there's a downturn in this industry, you can always move to another one.
My issue with employment in my country is that I find that, well, I am somewhat of a pessimistic person, but I don't think that we provide sustainable employment in my country. I think what happens is that people in my country, regardless of their educational level, undergo sporadic and intermittent periods of unemployment for varying factors in the economy. And I think that's due to, again, the factors of production. And I could demonstrate that opinion, that statement, whereby for a long time, Trinidad and Tobago has had a vast array of gas and energy supplies. As you know, that is a non-renewable sources of energy, which means that it will deplete. And we have depleted much of our reserves. So therefore, our ability to produce as much, the quantity to then meet the, what should I say, the output to meet the salaries that people would like to make, it's not there anymore. So there are people in my country who are making $10,000 a month as an engineer. So you can imagine how much money they convert that, how much money they was making monthly. But the factors of production could not keep up with paying those salaries. So therefore they had to close down a major refinery. Thus people lost employment and they were educated. So
yeah, and which
I'm not
unemployment do
exactly
you
sure.
think that is? Which unemployment would that fall
There's
under?
structural because it was a decision made by the government to close the company.
So
I
you
think so.
wouldn't refer to it as economic downturn?
Yes.
Because you said it was basically a country thing where it's not necessarily something that you guys can change, it's just that the resource is depleted. Those persons, were their skills transferable?
Well, they are in the oil and gas, so they are engineers, so I believe that they'll be very good at math, so they could be math teachers. But then again, I think that those professions do not pay the amount of money that they are looking for.
Versus they would have been working for.
Yeah, upwards of 10,000 US dollars a month.
Yeah, and
Those
this
are the
usually leads
professions.
to persons migrating because they're used to earning a certain amount, and then for whatever reason, economic downturn, or as you said, the government just made a choice. Persons start leaving, you're having brain drain. It's you to find these persons when things actually pick up back and the economy is basically booming. So yeah, great example, JJ. I think somebody had raised their hand. I think it was a Johnny, if I got the name correct.
Yeah, I have to go, but could you like add my number to the group chat, please?
Send your number in the chat.
So based on that point you mentioned about a division of labor increases output and productivity as tasks are assigned to different people, right? A negative of it is that it can become repetitive, mundane,
Yeah, persons lose their motivation.
But another issue with division of labor is a reduction of the salary by the employer. Because as there are more people, our employer then has to divide the sums of money earned by the company amongst the workers. So they will look for the least amount that they can send across. I think that's a what? Is that a positive or negative of division of labor? I think so.
It can be both, depending on the perspective that you're looking at it from. Because if you're looking at it from the laborer perspective, it would be a disadvantage. But if you're looking at it from the company or the organization's perspective, it would be an advantage because their overall cost would be very little in comparison to their workforce. So as I said, with economics, it's pretty subjective and you have to state which perspective you're looking at things from. So you're able to justify your reason. Let me send this number real quick.
I sent the number in the chat.
Yeah, I just took a picture. So I'll ask Janan to add you guys to the WhatsApp group. All right, so I think the last thing that we're going to touch on is this question. Explain how the existence of trade unions can lead to unemployment. Because I need to get ready for your math session later.
Trade unions have a tendency of, I think, how I look at trade unions, is that they have a way of leading to stalemates when they are in arbitration with an opposing body such as a government, an employer. Or they can also give illegal advice to employees such as strike out, don't go to work, which an employer then can lead to terminating the employee from their job. So I think that trade unions can render poor labor relation advice, such as an employee engaged in strike action, which may be against the terms and conditions of their contract. I think that's one way.
Yeah, that is one way, because they usually have influence over the employees. in that sense where, you know, they encourage them to do certain things and all of that. Another aspect could be where trade unions are also in charge of lobbying for certain wages. So as you know, they usually have this discussion, whether with government or the private sector, to have a discussion about if persons are being paid the adequate amount for the particular jobs that they're doing. Sometimes they lobby for higher prices or higher wages. These high wages sometimes, if these companies agree to them, like you would have mentioned before, JJ, if it is that they have to be paying persons this amount of money, they're willing to lay some persons off. Because basically they're saying, all right, since I'm paying you that much, you do 2 persons work instead of 1. And we get rid of the other person so we don't need. So that's another way it can also lead to unemployment. They lobby for high wages. These high wages force companies now to lay off persons in order to pay the others.
Thing with
And
it,
it's
miss, it stems back again to why people demand the higher need for labor, and that is because due to the items that they have to purchase, which is imported. So to me, again, Caribbean governments fail to rightize the problems, which is by bringing manufacture and production at home for products that we use. So therefore, the simple things like a phone case, to pens, to even pencils, bananas, things that can be grown here, because we don't grow it, we then have to import it, which leads to employers having to pay more due to what? What do businesses cite? External factors. They have to pay more for the item, more
and
shipping
even
fees. So it still
even
comes back to that point.
yeah, and even if we do produce some of these goods, the government still has to import in order to meet the demand of the country, and local persons have to be competing with these international costs. Again, the prices will continue to go up.
There is a solution to it. I think that consciously we'll have to change our diet, at least for us I can talk about Trinidad, because clearly I don't see this being sustainably. I can tell you that for the moment in Trinidad and Tobago, it's very scarce to get US dollars. So I can tell you one way directly. Normally, I know you know about JMMB, right? That's a Jamaican bank, right? So this is sometimes one of the benefits of integration. So JMMB is a Bank of Jamaica that has come to Trinidad here. So they brought their services here. They have employed people, share their expertise. They also work with other credit unions as well, right? Some years ago, you could have gotten in excess of $1,000 per month in excess, just purchasing, right? So it's not a credit card, but basically you would deposit the monies, your local currency, into their bank account, and they would exchange it to USD, and thus giving you the access to purchase goods online. Purchase goods and services online. So this was, going on for a period of time, and then, if I assume what the factors, they reduced the amount of US dollars that you have to live on. So now it went from 101 in excess of 1,000 USD to 250, which is very small. So it's very concerning. And again, that issue then stems to come back from the conglomerates having to take most of the US dollars, because I think a feature of Caribbean countries as a monopoly. So I want to have the control. I want to be the one main supplier of retail furnishes, motor vehicles, books. So I'm going to absorb most of the USD, leaving it for other citizens, less citizens, to have less access to USD, meaning that they have to come to my store. I can then increase the prices and make profit. So to me, it's deliberate.
Yeah, and take into consideration as well that these things that these financial institutions implement, they have more than one driving factors. So even, for example, you mentioned moving the spending amount for USD from 1,000 to like 250. You have to take into consideration now the things with scamming, all of that. So there might be a reason behind it, but usually they have the option where you can choose. So if that option doesn't exist, then it's an issue. But if it does, then there is justification, I'm guessing, for them taking that course of action. We would have had a brief discussion about the circular flow of income before. So moving from the firm to households, it would be factors of payment, and then from households to the firms would be you spending your money. And this is the last one. This is the last one. Explain how inflation affects the ability of households to purchase goods or food specifically. So we would have had this discussion before where I said inflation is basically prices going up over a period of time. So if prices continue to go up, for example, somebody who is earning.
Hello?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say sorry for cutting you off a couple of times. Probably some audio problems. Seem very eager about answering some of these questions. I look at, for me, I answer this question, I'll give a short definition. Inflation, such as this, is a sustained period of an increase in prices. I think, well, with inflation, it will deplete the purchasing power of the income generated, thus affecting the amount of food that they have to purchase, because the amount of food I want to purchase is stationary. So I want to purchase a certain amount, but then the amount of money that I have to purchase it is fluctuates. So therefore, it would impact my ability to purchase units of food. So that's how I think inflation affects that. It decreases your purchasing power. You can look at it, you purchase food. Inflation does decrease your purchasing power.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the main point. The fact that prices go up and your income is fixed, you aren't able to purchase as much as before or the same amount as before, so the purchasing power decreases. So in a scenario that I would have been explaining earlier, you have $10,000 and you were maybe able to purchase lunch for the month. Come maybe the next 2 years, that $10,000 won't be able to purchase lunch for a month, maybe only for a week or two. So your purchasing power decreases, hence you're not able to buy as much as you can before. And that's it for economics, guys. As I said, I will be dropping the slide in the chat in the WhatsApp group. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, send me a message. I'll try to respond as soon as possible. And if you guys don't have any questions, we'll end here for today. All right. Any questions?
No.
No questions. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. And if you're going to join the math session, see you guys in the afternoon.
Okay, Miss Bye. Thank you.